Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron.
One of the topics we seem to keep coming back to is testing. We like testing, right, Aaron? I mean, it makes us feel good about ourselves. And I think one of the things that's interesting about it as a topic, it kind of like application code. There's a lot of different ways to do something, and testing is sort of that same bucket, right? Testing is code. So there's a lot of different ways to test code. And we've kind of settled into some patterns over the years based on experience, things that have burned us, just kind of the scar tissue you build up over the years of writing code and finding ways that don't work. And so I'm going to zero in on one particular thing. So let's get a little bit nerdy here. I mean, that's why you're listening, right? You like code? I don't know. How do you test? Let's talk about like record creation.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a few different ways we've done this, and I'll kind of start with maybe the naive way. We can see what we've done to improve it and how it's actually an improvement. But so let's say you're creating a product. I don't know, is that a good generic noun that we're going to create here?
Yeah.
Create a product. How do you test it was created? Well, maybe get the first one back and assert that the properties were saved the way you think. And one piece of context here, because some people might be like, well, how would that work? In our approach, we're kind of starting with the most empty database possible for each test, right? So even like creating a user to post to the product endpoint or whatever, we'll create that as part of the test. So we don't have to worry like, oh, there's going to be like 50 other products in here. So just hearing me describe that, Aaron, why do you think that might not be a good approach? Because I know if I submit a PR to you and I'm doing that, you're going to have a comment. So share that comment with me.
Well, I think the first thing to note is you did set it up properly, saying there is nothing else in a database. So we can still use positional type retrievals, like first or latest or whatever, so I get that, it might be different if you have like 3 or 4 different blog comments or products or whatever, and you're creating it. You might do the latest one, try to retrieve that and verify it. But I think the real question is like, why would why is it bad to just use something like first versus the other options, which we have are first or fail or sole. And what I think is the reason why we reach for those is because there's one less step inside of our testing then. And then the error messages are, if it does fail, it's going to be much more clear. So if you think about it, if you go and try to create something, it doesn't create it, but it gives you a success message, with your response, and you go first, it's going to return null instead of, that model that wasn't created. So the first thing you really have to do is check to make sure it's an instance of the model or not null. And if you don't do that, then at least you start checking properties and stuff. But then you're going to get an error message like saying like can't find title on null or whatever. And that's kind of like a really weird sort of message to get in the middle of your tests. Whereas if you do like first or fail, or especially sole, which is great, sole is almost a better one if you're just creating one thing. Be a way to say like, first of all, I want the thing back that was created. Second, there better not be more than one.
Right.
So, there might be times when maybe there's some cases where you allow many and there's other ones where you just allow one or whatever. And so you get that all built in right away as you retrieve the model. So it's not going to be null. And it's also going to throw an exception if it's not found or if there's more than one. And those exceptions are a little bit more logical for you. You'll understand like, oh, I've tried to retrieve just a sole one, but there's more than one versus I can't read this property on null. There's one less step to try to troubleshoot that.
Yeah. And, like I want to just kind of comment a little bit on the use of sole, SOLE, because when that was added to Laravel, it wasn't that long ago, I don't think. I was like, what would I use this for? And I think some of the sample use cases given in application code didn't really resonate with me. But like testing is where it really did. Because like that scenario you gave where like this thing should only be creating one product. If there's 2 products in the table, something went wrong. Like that test should just fail. It should just stop. And so I don't think I've ever yet reached for sole as an eloquent method in application code that I can think of. But I do use it with some frequency in test code. But So I like what you said about the error message, because the initial reaction might be, well, if it says can't get property title on null, I know what that means, and we do. Like, we've over the years we've seen that error enough times, but like, why?
I've never seen that. I've never seen that error.
You've never seen that error? Get out of here!
I've never made that mistake.
But right, so well, duh, we know what that is. Like, the thing was null. That's where to look in the test. But like, why even force your brain to like go through that pathway if you can just catch that error, stop the test sooner? I think that's a better solution. So maybe one other little thing to put in there, because you mentioned use of the word, or the eloquent method, latest. And that's another thing too, where if we're testing and maybe more than one thing is getting created, or one thing is getting created in addition to some other things that we set up in that particular test's setup method,
mm-hmm.
then sorting becomes important too, because if you don't have an explicit sort, you're kind of relying on the way the database retrieves records to bring things back in the logical order you think they should be in. And so I just think that was worth calling out too, because that's another one that has burned me. If you don't sort it explicitly, or if you rely on like ordering by ID or something, or created at, or those, if you're not explicit about that, it may change down the road, and then you'll have tests fail, and it might even fail like 1 out of 100 times, and you're like, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's good you mentioned latest, because first of all, when you talk about that too, by default, I think it's sorted and created at. And so that's going to be a problem in your test, because whatever maybe you've seeded in, and also maybe what you've written, all might have happened within that 1 second. So it's like, well, which one does it pick? So make sure you pass in like ID or something, and that's if you have an auto incrementing ID.
Right.
And so that the other thing about that, one little other tip that we've used, which I am pretty certain is a good idea, otherwise I wouldn't be sharing it, but I'm not 100% sold, is especially when I have auto incrementing IDs, sometimes if I have a very complex set of data, I might create a factory of models up until the point that I'm going to create one with my endpoint with a specific ID, like 99, so that I know that the next one created will be 100. And so that way, maybe if there's like maybe if there's a bunch created, so there's like 100, 102, 104, or whatever, I can, point to the specific ones that I'm reasonably certain will be those IDs, versus, if you're, depending on how your database is set up, some IDs might be reused, or they might, so there's other little tips and tricks you can do there as well to retrieve the thing. And of course, this is all speculative on a little bit of us saying that the return of this endpoint is not like a JSON API or something like that.
Sure. Yeah.
Because a lot of times those will send back the ID, whereas, your web-based ones will just say, yeah, you made it, buddy.
Right. Yep. Good point. If I asked you, Aaron, what your shoe size is, would you know the answer to that question?
Yep.
You're not going to share with us?
Nope.
Too personal?
Yep.
Okay. Now, if I were to ask you, what size shoelaces do you use, would you know that?
Oh, no, I would not. I guess I didn't realize there's differences, but it makes sense, because there's like high tops, and then there's low tops, and then there's no shoelaces. I don't actually wear shoes with shoelaces. No, they're not Velcro. They're like leather sort of slip-ons. I'm thinking galoshes, but that's not the right word.
No. What you wear sounds classy. Galoshes is like for going out in the rain.
Yeah. I from my ankles down, I'm very classy.
That's where you want to be the classiest. Well, so one of my kids, I think the cat or something like chewed their shoelace, so we had to buy more shoelaces. And I was like, well, I'll go on Amazon, right? It's easy. I'm sure like there'll be a size for like kids versus adults. Oh, sweet child, that was not the case. There was like, how many inches, how many eyelets on the shoe, and I ended up ordering like 3 different sizes to find out one that was correct. But I just thought, like, it's kind of, I mean, I know that's a kind of an odd problem to have, but I think we need more awareness of shoelace sizes in our day-to-day life.
What were the size that you ended up on?
I don't even remember. That's the problem.
If you're looking for more tips for testing your Laravel applications, we can help.
Head over to masteringlaravel.io and click on articles. We have a couple on testing there.